Hello, this is Frank Pello, roving reporter for Source FM. I'm here at the cafe above the bookshop in Falmouth. I'm here with Sam Horton, the author of the books Gorse and Ragwort. Sam, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, really delighted to be here on such a beautiful, chilly night.
So you're here to talk about folk stories, and your two books are very much in that line. Can you just tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, of course. So Gorse and the sequel Ragwort are both Cornish folk fantasies. They're historical books set in the late 1700s, and they are set on a lightly fictionalised part of the North Cornish moors. And so the key part of the book is that in this world, Cornish folklore is very much real and tangible and dangerous. And it is a story about the people that deal with those worlds and the family dynamics between them, and the tension between folk belief and Christian religion.
So is it the folk element or the Cornishness of the tale that initially drew you into writing this?
I think for me it was the landscape. So I live very close to the moor. It's something I can see every day, and it's something that I walk on almost every day with a dog or alone. And I think what connected me to that landscape was just how alive and unique it felt. And so the first thing I really knew about writing these books, what I wanted to write, was about the moor, and everything else kind of flowed out of that. And like you always do when you're writing a book, you start to research things, and the biggest thread that came out of that research was folklore and folk stories and folk tales. And so that became very early on embedded into that landscape and the story that I wanted to tell.
I understand you weren't really an author before you wrote the first book, and I wonder how, having written a book and been successful, coming to the second book, how was it different?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. It was a big challenge. I think so often in life, that classic thing of the more you know, the harder things can get. And there's a lot of things I didn't know writing Gorse, which in hindsight made it a lot easier. So I think sitting down to write Ragwort, aside from anything else, the kind of big pressure of following on a story. Gorse could have any shape that I wanted it to have, because it was the start of something. And then with Ragwort, I had a world that I created and people that I'd populated it with, and characters who I now knew so well that they wouldn't let me do a bunch of stuff because it just wouldn't work. So I think playing in a world which had rules was a big change with Ragwort, and one that I really enjoyed, but definitely presented challenges.
And is that a world that you're likely to go back to again?
I'd like to one day. Yeah, I'm not sure how soon I'll go back, but it will always be there. And I think there are elements of the world that I'm hoping will raise their heads in other projects and other worlds. So I think whilst we might not go straight back to the moor for the next book, it's always going to be something that's present in the writing.
But you are committed to writing. This isn't something, an itch that you've scratched and now you're moving on to one of your many other creative endeavours.
No, quite the opposite. It's paid quite a lot of the other endeavours. One of the nicest things about finding writing was how right it felt, and how much closer I could get with text and words than I'd ever got with pen or pencil and creating visual images. And it's hugely addictive. So I'll keep writing as long as people keep reading it, I think. And probably if they don't, but I'd like them to keep reading if they would.
And your publisher, what sort of direction and encouragement are they giving you for where to go next?
Solaris are really supportive. They're a wonderful publisher based in Oxford, and from the second they took on Gorse, they've been a champion for the work and the writing I do, and the books that they're reading at the moment I'm hoping they like, but they've been incredibly encouraging throughout, and I was excited to bring them a new project because especially my editor Amy, I know will help me transform it into something I can't envision at the moment, but I know will be great.
Wonderful. We've got the Winter Solstice coming up, and I wonder what your feeling this time of the year? Is it something that has a real impact on you?
Yeah, I think, living in Cornwall, you are much more connected, I think, to the landscape and to the natural world and to these kind of seasonal changes. And it is important to me. I think, I'm not sure how I'll mark it yet. It might just be going outside and looking up at the stars, if the weather lets me. But I think it's really important to stop and kind of pause at these turning points of a year, and take stock and reflect. And I think especially at the Winter Solstice, when you have the year behind you and the year ahead, it's a really beautiful moment to kind of stop and take stock, I think, of what's happened.
What sort of reactions have you had from people? Are you now seen as some sort of encyclopedia of Cornish folk knowledge, or somebody maybe that people come and tell you about their experiences or their thoughts about Cornish folk?
Yeah, more the latter than the former. I mean, possibly people have asked me some opinions, and I will do my best. But I always think with things like folklore, I'm always very conscious of all the things I don't know, so I'm always a bit cautious about doing that. But certainly, people have brought me a huge number of stories, which I've really loved hearing, from all across, not just Cornwall but the country, and that's been really lovely. I think one of the nicest things I've heard for both books is readers who have come to tell me that this isn't the sort of thing they would normally read, but they really enjoyed it. And obviously, on a personal level, that's lovely, and I'm really pleased that they found my books something they enjoyed. But it also gives me an opportunity to say to them, well, it's a good sign to try and keep reading things you might not like, because the worst that happens is you have to put it down again. But I think there's a whole host of books that people don't consider for whatever reason that they're missing out on. So that's been nice.
Would you like to take this opportunity? I'll put you on the spot to say one book that maybe people should go out of their way, if it's not yours, to read.
Yeah, okay. Well, I tell you what I'll tell you is that if you enjoyed Gorse and you aren't sure you'd enjoy another book in that style, I would highly recommend Meet Me at the Surface by Jodie Matthews, which is similar in that it is set on the same patch of moor as Gorse, but that story takes place much more recently than Gorse does. But it's an incredible magical book of folklore and darkness and magic.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to us today, and best of luck with your future writings. This is Frank Pello signing off, back to the studio and Source FM.